All right. Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Coach Show. I'm your host, Dr. Coach Danny Pueblos, and today I have my good friend, former professional baseball player and current mental coach for the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, my friend Adam Law. How you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing fantastic, Dr. Coach. Thanks for having me on, and I'm super pumped to be here.
Absolutely. You and I have had a couple conversations in the past, and we definitely hit it off and be able to like talk shop. Is what it's all about, and just getting to learn you and your journey, your experience. We'll definitely dive deeper into it, but just your time as a professional baseball player and now serving as a mental coach. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on to kind of share your experience and give people like a behind the scenes look about who Adam Law is and how the field industry works, all that good stuff. But again, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, totally. Again, stoked to be here and really look forward to the conversation.
Right on, man. Well, let's get to it. So let's go back. Let's go back and talk to me. Talk to me about, you know, your early days playing ball, and when did you know, like, oh, I might have a shot to keep going, and be a part of that small percentage that goes pro?
Yeah, good question. I'm happy that you bring that up because it's always fun to reflect on, and it's unique. Everybody has their own unique story, but my father was a Major League All-Star. He was a 10-year Major League veteran, and then my grandfather, his father, was an 18-year Major League veteran, won the Cy Young Award, is a World Series champion. And so like from a very young age, I grew up around the game of baseball. And hats off to my dad. He never once forced us to play baseball. He just was there to support us, whether it was music or school, or he let us be us, which was really cool. And so I played Little League, never played travel ball or anything too crazy like that. But then I ended up walking on to play college baseball, and still, I just like had a good time. In the back of my head, not once did it really cross my mind of, wow, this is something that I could do as a profession. And it just played. I had a good time and, went to school. And then I started to physically mature a little bit and, get some thump in the bat and start to throw a little bit harder. And then it's like, wait a second, I might have a chance to make this a career. And then, professional teams start sending me letters or wanting to meet with me outside of class. And then it's like, okay, this might be something. And that's kind of really when my first belief of playing professionally happened, was while I was at the end of my sophomore year in college. I always thought that it would be cool to be a professional athlete, whether it was basketball, golf, or baseball, which were my three favorite sports. But then kind of really when it clicked was that summer between my sophomore and junior year, was the pieces started to come together. My body kind of filled out a little bit, and teams started to take notice. So I played one more year after my junior year and was drafted, and enjoyed 7 years kind of grinding it out in the minor leagues from 2013 through 2019.
Awesome. And before we get deeper into that, how good were you in basketball and golf? Were you like legit, or are you kind of like dabbled in it? Because I know for me, I golf, but not really. And I go with some buddies, and that's it. Or were you actually like, hey, like legit golfer and basketball at the same time?
I'll put it into perspective. Baseball in high school was my worst sport. So like I was an all-state basketball player, an all-state golfer.
No big deal.
Though basketball was my favorite sport, I played with two dudes that played in the NBA. One is like a god overseas at the moment. And then another kid that played D1 hoops. So like I was kind of the little point guard that kind of ran the show. But yeah, I loved basketball. I loved golf, and then baseball was just kind of But that's the little perspective I would say. Baseball was my worst sport.
I guess what was your worst sport? Like how everything kind of turned out for you, right? Hey, you're a three-sport athlete, man. That's awesome. Stud. Dog. But that's cool, man. It's good to know. So, and by the way, what organizations did you, or who drafted you, and then kind of how did that kind of take form into the next handful of years?
Okay, yeah. So the Dodgers were the ones that picked me in the 12th round in
Okay.
2013, and played with the Dodgers in the minor leagues. Was up in made it up to Double A for like my third consecutive year, and they took me off of the active roster. They felt that there was somebody else who needed to play, and so they took me off the active roster. And they gave me a couple options. They said you can weather the storm and see when a roster spot opens to keep on playing, or we can send your name to the 29 other teams saying that you're available for a trade. And I was like, man, I want to play. Like, the Dodgers were always stacked with minor league prospects, and I was getting a little bit older. I'd been there for 3.5 years, almost 4 years, and was like, all right, well, let's see what happens. And so Gabe Kapler, who's the manager of the San Francisco Giants, currently was our minor league director. And he sent out that email to the 29 other teams saying, hey, Adam Law's available. And shortly after, the Seattle Mariners called Kapler with the Dodgers and said, hey, we'll take him. So they made a little minor league trade. And within 2 days, I was in Double A on the active roster with the Seattle Mariners. So then I played there for the next 3.5, 4-ish years, and then finished in Triple A, unfortunately, but really enjoyed my time as a player. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but really forming my desire to be a mental skills coach, a performance psychology practitioner. So Dodgers, Mariners, and then now I'm back with the Dodgers as a staff member.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good experience, man. And yeah, I mean, I know some people are like, oh, he made it to this level, or he didn't really get to that point. Like, listen, like you were, and this as a part of a small percentage of the population that gets to play or even sniff at that level, right? And so that's a ton to be proud of, man. And I can't imagine that experience. So, like, talk to me about that. Talk to me, and before we get into your current position now, talk to me about what it was like, kind of your junior year in college, getting ready to get drafted, and you realizing, hey, I might have a shot at this thing, and kind of like what that and what's pretty cool about it now is that now as a mental skills coach, you're able to like work with on the other side of it, right? But like, what did you experience? What do you remember experiencing or feeling, or what kind of, was there any pressures as far as to perform to, during that time before, then after you got drafted?
Yeah. So I think certainly, and I mentioned my pedigree at the beginning because that's a huge piece in my desire to go down this path post playing of helping guys with the challenges that impact their performance on the field. And so, especially in high school and college, father of Major League All-Star, grandfather, Cy Young Award winner, and here I am, like some slap of a high school baseball player. And in retrospect, that was probably the reason why I never went after it hard, because I knew that, and it's probably going to take a lot to even reach their level. And I always felt external pressure, though it probably didn't exist as much as I had made it to seem that it existed, to fulfill in those footsteps of that of my father and grandfather. And so high school and college definitely was like, oh, I'm just Vance's kid. Vance is my father, or I'm Vernon's grandson. And that always impacted me, and it impacted me into my professional career as well. I would say about 3 or 4 years into my minor league journey, it was like, all right, dude, you got to figure it out. You can't tiptoe around being Vance's kid or Vernon's grandson. Like, you got to go make a name for yourself. And rather than tying my successes to my identity as a person and as a son and grandson, I was able to find ways to separate Adam, the baseball player, from Adam, the human. Unfortunately, it took me 3 or 4 years to do that. Of course, I would have loved to have discovered that in high school or in college, just not for, hey, who knows what would have happened as a player, but just for my own sanity, instead of like playing small because of my lineage, which is so dumb to say, but that's how I felt, and that was my experience. So yeah, 4 years into the pro game was like, okay, figure it out on your own and be your own person. It's still a challenge for me. Like, I'll meet new people. Oh, you're Vance's son. And, you just kind of got to reframe it of like, wow, how cool is that they know who my dad is and that my dad has made an impact on people's lives. So stuff that I'm still challenged with, but wouldn't trade any of my experiences to change anything.
Sure. And I appreciate you sharing that, man, and being vulnerable. Yeah, because it's true. And I mean, it's enough pressure just for anyone at that point of time, right? Of having to live up to just general expectations, right? Like I've worked with different athletes in different sports who were kind of in that transitional period, like getting ready to go, to college or going pro, amateur to pro, you name it. And all of a sudden, their name is put out there, and they get put on this pedestal amongst their families, their friends, their communities, right? I mean, that's a lot of pressure in itself, let alone having that lineage, like you talked about, to kind of have to live up to is what, that challenge that was a part of it, right? And you brought up a great point, which I always try to address with my athletes is, the whole identity factor, right? And trying to separate the person from what they do, right? Because the bottom line is, like, what we do is not always going to be the same. Oftentimes it's not, especially in sports, right? Unless you're like Tom Brady playing until he's 75. At some point, even the almighty Tom Brady has to hang him up, and that's what's tough for so many people to even like accept, right? To accept the fact and that I'm not always going to be a ball player. I'm not always going to play the game that I love, the game that I grew up with, the game that I was glorified by, and that's scary for a lot of people. And I think not only does it help them, kind of help them like after when they transition to the next chapter, once they hang them up, but even during as you experience too, right? Because you're able to like, all right, like even if you have a bad game, right? Like what position did you play most of the time?
Middle infield. I was a shortstop and second baseman.
Okay, so like, that's what that's what you played, and even hitting right, you go out have it. I'm sure that just like with anyone else, you kind of have those games where you might go 0 for right or 1 for 4. It just those not so great games, and sometimes people let that trickle into their personal life, the person they see in the mirror every day. And I think by separating those two things, as far as like I'm Adam, I'm Danny, and this is what I do, right? I think it just helps to kind of separate the two. Because growing up, you ask all these athletes, like, oh, like, who are you? Oh, I'm a baseball player. I'm a football player. I'm a softball player. And all of a sudden, that's not there anymore. That's where these identity issues come. Right? I see it all the time during my time working with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. These Hall of Fame players, NFL players who have been identified with these as a football player for so long, and it's like, what do I do now? And it's not just athletes. Anyone and everyone experiences, at some point when it's time to retire, right? Like my dad, he's getting ready to retire. He's worked in aerospace for about 30 years. And He's like, oh, shit. Like, now I got to figure out what to do next because I've always done this. This is who I've been, So it's a very common experience. And that's why I appreciate you kind of sharing that because, it's definitely a challenge that so many people go through, whether they realize it or not. I think when people are able to kind of separate those and establish who they are, and not only what they do, but also recognizing, hey, like I'm more than a baseball player, or I'm more than a mental coach. I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a good friend, right? Like those are core attributes that a lot of times won't really change, right? So what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, as you're mentioning that, it made me think of two things that you had hit on was understanding the differences or being able to separate from who you are from what you do really helps in come career transition time, as you had mentioned. And I know we've talked about your time with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I've seen it with my dad and grandfather, where it's like they've got news cameras in their face all the way up until they're 65, 70. And how are they able to separate Vernon Law, the Cy Young Award winner, from Vernon Law, the grandpa? And we've at times seen there not be able to be much separation. And so I think if part of what I like to do with players is how can we start to separate that now? And an easy intervention is, hi, my name's Adam Law and I work as a professional baseball player. Instead of, hi, my name's Adam Law and I'm a professional baseball player. Just that simple, I work as,
Mhm.
provides the clarity, the separation in the moment, and you don't end up believing what you're telling other people. So, yeah, I think being able to understand the differences between who you are and what you do while you're doing it, and then also that aids in the career transition because all of us are going to take our spikes off at one point or the other, whether we choose to or whether somebody else chooses for us. And the earlier we can get ahead of that, the better, because we see it in the pro game all the time. Guys, they get released or they retire, and then it's like they come calling us, dude, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But had you been contingency planning or understanding that you are more than a baseball player from the get-go, and that's not going to take away from your ability to perform on the field, in the weight room, like your career as a professional athlete, it just helps you be a little bit more well-rounded and kind of take a holistic approach to what you're doing. So that's my little 2 cents on that, but I think it's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And when you have, and that's a challenging part. What I've come across for some athletes who, even when I bring up like, oh, like have you thought about what life after your sport looks like? And it's like, I just they act like they look like they've seen a ghost almost, like they never thought about that, right? Because there's this sense of like invincibility into to a lot of athletes where it's like they're so, and it's good that they're immersed in the moment and what they're doing, but yeah, it's like because ideally every athlete, right, wants to have this long career, wants to go out on their own terms, but the reality is that it doesn't always work out that way. Whether it's especially in baseball, right? Because it's a more of a process to get to the show with major leagues compared to other sports, and you know people see on the stuff on TV and the teams, right? But they don't really. A lot of people don't kind of understand about what it takes to get there, right? And how even like I already talked about how it's a small percentage of the population who gets to be able to play pro ball, period, let alone make it to the major league. It's like a small percentage of that small percentage that makes it to that point, um, and when I brought that topic up before, is yeah, they're like, oh, well, no, like, no, I haven't thought about that, but yeah, and you'd be surprised. Some athletes, oh yeah, like, yeah, I want to open up my own gym. I want to, coach. I want to be in TV, right, media, all that stuff, right. And a lot of times, and hopefully they go on their own terms, but sometimes, as you know, it's either they just for whatever reason they either maybe get hurt, right, their injury, just continuous injury, or they just they're not getting picked up anywhere, right? Then all of a sudden, oh shit, like what do I do now? Like I was preparing to play for another 5-10 years, if not more. And all of a sudden they're having to like change course almost, and so I think that's why it's good for for these athletes to know, right, especially now, now in sports, especially in baseball, where you have resources available, such as mental skills coaches, among other, other resources they have to talk about this stuff, right? Even while they're in it, say, hey, let's talk about some things. Because sometimes this stuff causes anxiety in some players, right? Because you have just this whole pressure to perform, pressure to get a contract to stay on the club, and then there's also that lingering potential reality of like, shit, what if this doesn't work out? So I think that's where you've kind of transitioning into this next chapter, and you're the epitome of this, how you're able to transition from playing into now your current role as a mental skills coach with the Dodgers. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about like how that transition occurred, and then kind of how it's going now.
Yeah, I do want to circle back, and not to beat a dead horse. I'll get to that.
Sure,
but the identity piece is huge. We might have guys that are perennial all-stars who exceptional world-class athletes. They still need to understand that they're more than a baseball player, because we're talking with like dudes that got a wife, children that they got to go home to as so-and-so, not the baseball player. You got to be able to go home to your family as dad, even though you went 0 for 5 and made an error or something like that. And so that piece, and then there is the injury piece that you had talked about. Guys are going to have Tommy John surgery and miss 15 months of, they're going to miss a whole year and another half of a year. And now their whole identity is attached to their ability to throw a baseball really, really hard. Or if you're a hitter who had a season-ending injury, your identity is to hit the ball really, really far. Now, all of a sudden, that's taken away from you. Now what? And so, again, getting ahead of it is super important, and being able to come up with strategies to separate who you are from what you do. To answer your question of how did I get into this, what I'm doing now? And it's probably 2 or 3 faceted. I would say, like, I performed with a lot of performance anxiety simply because of my dad and grandpa, is kind of how I had mentioned it earlier, of like, man, do I really belong here? Am I going to live up to the name? That whole thing, mostly self-imposed, of my own little voice in my head telling me what I should be
imposter
thinking.
syndrome, kind of like talking to you.
Exactly. And then believing it and letting that become the story that I told myself, as opposed to just recognizing it as a random thought.
Yeah.
So that piece. The second piece was, I had a lot of influential mental skills coaches or sports psychologists that I worked with, starting in college all the way up through the pro ranks. And in retrospect, what I'm going to say is a little bit narrow-minded. And I hope that if there's anybody listening who like takes it the wrong way, don't, because hopefully I put a little bow on the top to make it like how I really feel about it. But as a player, I had met with a handful of practitioners that would empathize with what I was going through or with what I was struggling with. Yeah. I'm 0 for 20, and I got some dude in a shirt and tie. I'm in his office telling me, oh man, I know that's so tough what you're going through. And I know his intentions were good. But in the back of my mind was like, this dude has no idea what I'm going through right now. I'm 0 for 20. I got to get a hit. I'm going to get released. Like all these different things that are going on in my head. And I've got some dude that never played baseball before trying to tell me how I'm feeling. And so that was always kind of there of like, wow, how cool would that be if I could be somebody who had experienced or lived in the shoes of what some of these guys will experience similarly and can relate with them that way. That's what I thought as professional athlete Adam. Mm-hmm. So I retired from playing. I got released and made the decision to officially hang them up, coming to crossroads. All right, what am I going to do? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a go. I've had a lot of really good mentors that have kind of pushed me along the path. Justin Sua with the Rays, Jimmy Van Ostrand with the Toronto Blue Jays, Darren McMains he's now in the corporate space, but was with me with the Mariners as a mental skills coach. And those guys kind of helped me understand that, it could be something that I could do. Now, here's a little bow on the top. since being in the field, I have seen so many exceptional practitioners who never played baseball, who don't even know a thing about baseball. And so that was narrow-minded of me to think that way as a player, because I've seen the impact that practitioners who don't even know a lick about baseball, they've been able to impact guys' careers, guys' lives, help them make lots and lots of money regardless or without even knowing baseball. So, but that's what, honestly, that's what pushed me in the path. Was like, okay, how cool. Maybe I could relate to some dudes that otherwise maybe wouldn't relate to a mental skills practitioner.
That's awesome, man. And
Is that too brash? Is that too
no,
hard?
no, hey, you being as real as you gotta be, man. I appreciate the realness. You know, don't. It's not the time to beat around the bush, man. You tell it like it is, you know, and because I know people, including myself, appreciate that. Appreciate the realness, the real stuff, the genuineness, right? And not saying everything was all sunshine and rainbows. Everyone I worked with was awesome, right? It's just like, no, bullshit.
Okay, good.
That's not life, right? And so that's why I appreciate the genuineness. But no, definitely, you know, I definitely appreciate you sharing that and you know, the experience you've had and kind of taking that different perspective as a player versus now mental skills coach, right? So now looking at that, and you know, you mentioned how, you know, having been around practitioners with little to no experience, you know, playing ball, especially at the pro level, or even college level, what do you feel they have done to be effective in your eyes?
Yeah. And this is such a good question because, I mean, let's be honest, 99.9% of those who want to get in this field will never be a professional athlete. And so I've seen it firsthand almost every single day. When I'm making my rounds at the ballpark with players and staff members, almost every day I've got some dude that's like, hey, when is your coworker available? Yeah. And this dude is amazing. He has a military background. He played lacrosse and ice hockey, and he's been in pro ball for, eight years now, and still doesn't know. I think he knows, but he doesn't. He acts like he doesn't know, which is awesome because it plays to his strengths as an outsider's voice. And so I've seen a lot of players want to talk to him because he doesn't know really what's going on the inside. And it's an external perspective that's really, really refreshing for players. So that's been one way that somebody without baseball background has been effective. The second thing I think is acknowledging, you know what, Dr. Coach, I don't really know a whole lot about baseball, but I do know that the skills that we're going to go over are very applicable to what you experience as an elite athlete or as a professional athlete. And just being upfront, honest, and vulnerable about your incompetencies and the transferability of what the research tells us works and how it can impact you as an individual, as an elite athlete. And I've worked with a couple concert pianists and violin soloists. Like, I have no idea what they're going on, like what's going through their head as when they're on stage. But I do know that the skills that we teach our professional athletes on the baseball field and in the classroom are applicable to what they do in a Bravenel Hall in front of 12,000 people. But being upfront and honest and genuine about that is really good. And I also think, lastly, we need to be able to attack. And if you're working in a team environment, hopefully you're lucky enough to have more than just you doing it. You've got different perspectives. So you've got me as a former pro athlete. We've got a guy with military background. We have an academic, a former professor, and then we've got exceptionally trained bilingual practitioner who speaks English and Spanish. So like, we're coming at these dudes. We've got a menu of options for guys to get help. So leaning into their strengths is essential.
I love it. That's good. Options are always good, right? As long as the options are good. No, but yeah, it's absolutely true. And it's funny you bring that up as far as you working with a concert pianist and areas that you I don't know if you ever imagined yourself working in. I know I've dabbled in areas I've never like I know it. Put it this way, I'm currently working with an archer. An
Oh,
archer.
wow.
I've worked with an Olympic badminton. I talked to an Olympic badminton player before. Like, I'm like, what the hell is badminton? What the hell is I know archery, but I'm like, so yeah, I'm working with this archer now. I'm like, and yeah, you're right. It's about being honest and upfront. And I totally listen. I'll be honest with you. I don't know anything. I've seen Robin Hood, but that's the extent of my archery knowledge. So I'm learning. I'm asking questions, and I'm finding myself looking this stuff up. Like even after our session, I'm like, oh, I mean, what the hell? What the hell is a compound bow? Okay. So I'm learning all this stuff, right? Just so I can kind of like, get to know her lingo and what she's talking about, and talking about different types of bows, right? And but yeah, when it comes down to like the mental side, there's so much similarities. There's so much like just seeing the kind of things that might be triggering, or mental blocks, or like the negative self-talk, or like saying I can't pull this all the way back because I might mess up. Right? How often do you see that in baseball? I can't. I gotta fix. You're so in your head about fixing your stance or gripping the bat too tight, or all that stuff. I mean, there's so much crossover, right? And that's why there's so much. That's why we're mental performance coaches, where we could dabble in so many different areas of performance, right?
Yeah, for sure. And leaning into those competencies that we have, what makes us great and unique, can really impact and help others. So yeah, it's spot on with you working with an archer, and those in our field working with people in contexts that they don't necessarily understand. I do think it's important, however, to not use that as a crutch, but gain contextual intelligence about the environment within which you're working. And like you said, looking up what the heck is this kind of bow, and expanding your knowledge base on that, I think is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And even going back to like the genuineness part, because I'm sure there are people out there. And I remember when I first started, I would do this to a certain extent with sports I wasn't too like keen on or kind of knowledgeable about. I would try to like BS my way around it, right? Pretend like I know this. Oh yeah, of course,
100%.
But like over the years and just like working with my mentees, working with students, and having the experience, and this comes with maturity as well. I'm like just being genuine is the way to go, because not only is it gonna show them that you're real, and that because a lot of times the athletes or anyone else that we're working with, they're going to pick up on their BS meter is going to go off, right? They're going to tell,
they see
like,
through
this
it.
guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? And so not only that, but I really feel it presents an opportunity to build the rapport with whoever we're working with, because I remember working with a sports agency, and half of the sports clients were hockey, and half of them were pro baseball. And with baseball, I played for several years, so I know the game inside and out. But hockey, not a damn thing. I've been to a couple games, here and there, and but yeah, instead of trying to BS my way and like, oh yeah, like I've seen Mighty Ducks, it's awesome. I used to rollerblade, right? Like I was like, listen, man, like. I'll be honest with you. Like, I want to learn. I don't really know too much about hockey as far as like the little nuances and intricacies, but I want to learn. And every time I've come across someone who is in a different, who was in a sport or industry that I'm not too familiar with, I've never had one person, kind of say, "Oh, like that's horrible. How do you not know what the hell I'm doing?" Because most people like talking about themselves, and most people like talking about what they love to do. So I've used that as an opportunity to not only like learn about their sport from their perspective, but also to be able to help build that rapport and that relationship. And that's only grown stronger with everyone that I've done that with, So that's why I tell people, like, hey, be genuine. Don't try to BS. Hey, just be upfront about it. And also recognize, hey, there's so much just kind of crossover and similarities when it comes to the mental game as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Spot on, man. I mean, the genuineness, being upfront about it, learning what you can about the context, and then going from there. It provides a really refreshing perspective to athletes and performers who are consistently told how good they are and like that they can't do anything wrong, where we can come in fresh set of eyes and we'll probably say some things that may rub them the wrong way, or the lingo, the jargon isn't the same, and it's good. It's refreshing, at least from my experience.
Yeah. But that's a part of the relationship building, right? That's even when I've worked with my clients, my athletes, I've told them, listen, I'm very much a coach at heart. Like, 'cause I've coached sport. As soon as I was done playing sports as an athlete, I got right into coaching. I love being around sports and athletes. And I would tell all my athletes and even the parents of like the younger athletes, like, listen, the way I go about things is I'm genuine, and I have a true passion for wanting to help you or your kid. And sometimes if I feel necessary, I might have to show some tough love, right? Not being a jerk or anything like that, but like, hey, it's kind of like a coach, right? If you're kind of slacking off, well, hey, let's get going, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I told them, understand, it's all out of love. It's all out of a place of passion and desire for me to want to help get you to where you want to go, wherever that is, whether it's related to your sport, what you do, or your personal life, or both, I think that definitely comes a long way. And that's one thing I learned even when I was coaching, is like, because I remember my first years of coaching, I was coaching football, and the way I was coached was like old school, in your face, grabbing the face mask, tell how dumb we are, all that stuff, right? And like that's how I knew to coach, like just kind of going guns a blazing, right, and yelling and screaming, all that stuff. And then as time went on, I was like, hey, that's yeah. And a couple of players might respond to that, but a lot of them didn't. A lot of them just kind of shut down. And I realized, hey, all these people are different, right? They respond differently. And that's something that I've kind of carried over into, my role as a mental coach now, and working with these different people, is kind of going in with an open mind and realizing like, hey, everyone comes from a different backgrounds, journeys. And again, that's a part of the bond building and learning about them, right? And it's why it's definitely a pleasure to be able to do what I do and do what we do, right? And just learning about the person, not only about what they do on the field, what their batting average is, but just learning about the person. And I think once the athlete or whoever we're working with, once they know that you truly care about them and you truly have their best interests in mind, 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to run through a wall for you. That's I learned that in coaching, and even now as a mental coach.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the age old. Oh, sorry.
No, talk to me about from like your perspective as both a mental coach and as a former player, like, and think about your previous like coaches and what has worked well and what didn't work too well.
Yeah, it's the age old saying of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I know that saying's bastardized, but like it really is true. And I think I'm still a young practitioner in the field, but I did learn earlier of like, man, I wanted to meet with these teams or this individual and jump straight to a mindfulness technique or some way to accept whatever their performance is. Like, yeah, I could do that. And the player is just like, who the heck is this guy? He doesn't even know who I am. Yeah. And so first building the relationship, I think of even the best coaches that I had as a player, the best sports psychologists or mental performance coaches that I had as a player were those who really cared about me and wasn't necessarily wanted to sit down and shove some psychoeducation down my throat and me to all of a sudden break out of my slump. Like, they saw me for who I was. And through my experience now as a practitioner, being able to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Okay, Adam, we don't need to sit down and have an imagery script right here. Like, let's see how the dude's family's doing. Let's see how he's feeling. Let's see if you got a girlfriend that broke up with him or if things are okay off of the field. And I've noticed a lot. So in my role, I'm in a baseball uniform. I look just like a coach. And that's the interactions that people primarily see me as like, oh, there's Adam. What I've noticed to be really beneficial is to get together outside of the performance environment. So whether you're wearing khaki pants and a collared shirt, and that's what everybody always sees you in at the stadium, like, hey, you want to go meet up for lunch? And they see you outside of the work environment to build a deeper relationship. And that's been really, really effective, of taking players to lunch or staff to dinners and just being together and seeing, oh, wow, like Adam's a normal guy. You're a normal guy. We can be friends. And it's been really cool to see how those experiences have opened up doors for conversations in the future, whether that be a week, 2 weeks later, or years down the road. Those little, just kind of chipping away has been really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you talked about, building that relationship outside of the workplace, or on the field, or, all that stuff, because that even just taking them out to, hey, let's go grab a quick bite, a little fast food or just something quick, right? We'll go get something real quick. Like that time, it can make a huge difference, right? Because so many, a lot of the people that we work with, so many people will come in with like a wall up, right? Some people's walls are higher than others, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're trying to figure out if they could trust us, right? They could trust us to be able to open up to us, and especially it's even more of a challenge when you have someone who, through their past experience, they've been like almost conditioned to not trust other people, right? Mm-hmm. Not trust someone in a seemingly authority position, right? Which sometimes we might be put in that kind of category. Some people, right? And to where like they're not really, or some people just don't open up to people in general, right? And I think there's those small things, as far as asking about their families, asking about, how's if you're working with like a student athlete, how your classes going, right? How's school going? What's your favorite? What classes are you taking right now, right? Because that's what I would do when I was coaching. Before, when I was coaching football, basketball, baseball, before practice was started, I made it a point to go out to practice early while they were getting dressed and warming up. Just go out there and chat with them, right? Hey, how's it going? How's the weekend? How's your mom? Oh, okay, cool. And like just those small conversations made a huge difference, right? And sometimes even when coaching, I would show them tough love, but it's like they know, like, hey, I wasn't being a jerk or anything like that. Like, and they're okay, yeah, coach, I got you. And it was always a strong relationship, and that's why I found being effective. Even now, working with my athletes and clients as a mental coach, I every session every talk we have, every chat, I'm always starting off with that kind of stuff. Hey, how's it going? Right? We have any plans for the weekend? How's your family doing? Right? How's the weather? Like just a small talk, right? It might seem so insignificant, but it's not, and I think that definitely makes a difference.
As you're saying that too, I think it's a little bit easier when you're employed full time with a team to have those. We like to call them like a clubhouse crawl. So go in the morning, or in the afternoon, guys are hanging out in the clubhouse, hey, walking around, high five and BS and having a good time. In my private practice, most of it's done virtually. And so that's been a piece that it's like, man, how do I deepen the relationship that I have with my clients when I'm not with them? And through trial and error, like I'm still learning and I'm open to any ideas, but I found to be successful setting reminders in my phone. Hey, informal check-in with so-and-so every 3 days. And so I've got my phone is beeping. I try to keep them all around the same time so that like I'm not always on my phone, but that's been really good of, hey dude, how are things going? Yeah. Hey, good luck in your start this weekend, or hey, good luck in the tennis match that you got tomorrow. And not even getting into any type of mental skills, but just letting them know that I'm genuinely thinking about them. Certainly, I've got the reminder, but like they're in my head. And so I think that's been effective from a virtual standpoint when we're not able to go out to get something to eat or make a clubhouse crawl, hang out during batting practice.
Yeah, that's a good point. And and that's a good way. It just again, the smallest things will matter in the long run, right? It's like little pieces of brick. You're building the foundation, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes the foundational pieces are big, right? We make breakthroughs, but sometimes it's those small ones. It's the cement, the glue. It kind of brings it all together, right? And the small things, the details matter. And yeah, I think that's a great way to go about it. I think and even just like if you have the player's number, and say, hey, like because what I'll do sometimes I'll send them stuff randomly, right? Or sometimes we'll start our talk and awesome, hey, how's it going? Oh, what'd you do? Oh, we went to go, eat at a restaurant. Oh, where'd you go eat? Oh, okay. And then like next thing you know, I'm texting them, oh, you gotta go try out this place, right? They're local, right? And just like that stuff, right? It just has nothing to do with their sport or what they do, but it's a part of that relationship building, right? It's a part of that rapport. It's a text, it's a small text, or just saying, yeah, like I said, good luck today or good luck in your game, right?
Mhm.
Looking forward to seeing how it goes. And even during a chat, during a session, I know, and I remember thinking of this when I first started, is like, oh, I have to be structured. I have to start right away. I have to remember what I was taught in my grad school classes, all that stuff. And then I just got to the point where I'm just like, man, like I'm not a robot, and I'm not, and when I got to the point of recognizing that these are just people, we're having conversations. I'm here to help them, and I want to help build this relationship with them, like genuinely wanting to build that, because sometimes people try to force it. People just try to tick that box, like, okay, it's report building time. Now I have to like ask them how their day was. Like, no, I actually be genuinely interested. Hey, how was your day? And
Mhm.
like, yeah, I even if I have a client like with the archer, like the first 5-10 minutes is a 30-45 minute talk, but for the first 5-10 minutes, because we just started not too long ago, it's like me asking about how our school's going, how this is going, this, and yet we haven't even got to the thing yet. And the magic about the way doing that is, and this is why I've always felt like whether it's mental coaching, therapy, anything in that kind of realm, when you're able to have more conversations instead of trying to make it like a cookie cutter approach, it's an art form. It's truly an art form, right? And this takes time to develop. And you couple that with your own style, your own unique style, and going with that, being genuine to yourself and not trying to mimic or model anyone that's
Mhm.
not the same way as you. Like, you gotta be true to yourself. I had mentees in the past who would practice and they would try to like mimic my approach, where I'm like a coach, kind of rah right, and they weren't like the personality was not like that. And I'm like, don't be something that you're not. Just go with what you are, who you are, sharpen those skills, right? And because again, the client's going to pick up on the BS meter for not real, right? And even just starting off the conversations of, hey, how's it going? How was your day? How was your weekend? Right? Oh, did you go? Oh, you saw a movie. What'd you think? Right? Oh, how's school going? Okay. And then next thing you know, like you're getting right into it. It's like naturally flows into like the issue or whatever that they're going through, right? And it's like, oh shit, like we're done. Next thing you know, we're done. And it's, oh, I didn't even realize we started. Like that's a part of the art form that you kind of pick up on and you kind of realize. But at the same time, you're also building that relationship, that rapport with whoever you're working with, right? And that's why, I feel it's been effective for me, and because it's a very common thing that, again, myself included, early practitioners will try to do like by the book, structured, right? Everyone's doing imagery, everyone's doing goal setting, everyone's doing this and that, right? Where I just have, I found just having a conversation, and it also helps put them at ease too. I found, to where again we're just talking. It's because especially when you have people coming in and have this like mentality of like, oh, this is gonna be like me laying on a couch like Freud, someone talking to me asking about my childhood, right? Like when you can kind of like dispel all that and say, hey, we're just gonna have a conversation. And then, oh, okay, well, yeah, I could have a conversation, right? And then all of a sudden you're kind of getting into it without even without them realizing it.
Yeah, 100%.
So but yeah, man, there's a lot that goes into that stuff, and I'm glad that you're able to have your experience with that. And when it comes to your experience as a pro athlete and just athlete in general, how do you feel that's helped you be a mental coach now?
As far as in terms of like relationship building, is that
Building relationships, being able to understand, the players in a different way versus someone who hasn't had that experience, right?
Yeah, and like again, just like being genuine with the guys of, hey, I've been 0 for 20, you've been 0 for 20. I actually don't know what you're going through, but I may be able to relate to it in some way. So deploying the empathetic, the focusing, the reiterating listening skills that we learned in graduate school has been kind of my best friend, and keep those in my pocket. It's been beneficial that I can talk the talk of and use jargon of baseball, can dive into the analytics and the statistics of certain numbers that our players are producing, and how maybe a mindset or a mentality may influence those numbers. And so just because I have that database or that Rolodex in my head of what causes those numbers, being familiar with those numbers, and that's not to say that anybody can't learn that. I know, like the people with the Mariners, the mental skills coaches with the Seattle Mariners are very well versed in their analytics and use those to help drive their mental performance decisions of what are we going to work with these players. So I definitely try to leverage my playing experience, but that's not the end all be all. As we talked about earlier, some dudes don't want to hear from me, which like I totally respect. So,
Yeah.
But hopefully I've opened up some doors with players that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been opened.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge the fact that the first response you gave was, well, I don't really know, or I might not have experience with it gone through, because it can be very easy, right, for someone like you with experience to say, I've been there. I've strapped them up and I know exactly what you're going through, right? It's very easy for someone to fall into that trap, right? And I love the fact that you said that you're like, yeah, I don't know, like I might have an idea, right? Like you know your experience, you know how you perceive certain situations and got through certain situations, but the next guy had a different experience, or they look at things differently, or they've been taught different coping strategies growing up, right? So I love the fact that you acknowledge that, man. Because I know there are people who might use that experience to leverage it, like you said, and just say, oh yeah, I've been there, like I know exactly what you're going through, and then that could easily just turn someone off because like, who the hell are you? You don't know my life, you don't know, like, yeah, you might have similar experiences, but like there's so many different parts of the journeys that you and versus someone else has gone through, that, or just even just like how they approach different adverse situations during the game and in life in general, right?
Yeah, if you want to shut somebody up, tell them that you've experienced what they've experienced. And it's like, oh wow, here I am telling you what I'm going through, and you're going through the same thing. You know exactly what I'm going through. Walls go straight up. So just discounting somebody's experience, I think is unprofessional and can be a huge turnoff. So yeah, I try to tiptoe that line of understanding what the grind that is professional baseball is, but also recognizing that I may be way off from my experience versus somebody else's.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Keep that going, because it's a great, and that goes back to what we talked about before, as far as having that open slate when you go into working with someone, right? Open mind, not assuming anything, right? That's learning about them, and that's cool. That's what's the benefit of like working with the team versus having your own practice or your own business, right? Is like when you're with the team, you're able to immerse yourself more. You're able to learn more about the team dynamics, the cohesiveness, the culture, the individual players, coaches, staff, right? And you gotta get a better understanding about it, where sometimes we don't really it takes a little bit longer when you're working with like, with this clients, just, who come randomly out of nowhere, or you just working with someone who calls you up, say, hey, I need some help, right? So that's why I've always told, people around me, like, especially mentees, early practitioners, just to be careful with that, and like, don't go into anything assuming, especially like, oh yeah, I've worked with a baseball player before. I know how to work with them. Like, yeah, you worked with one baseball player or two, or whatever, but they're different people, Like, you have to be careful of falling into that trap of assuming, you already know what you think is gonna be effective, even before you even talk to them, right? It's like, oh, I have this worksheet ready to go. I'm gonna help them. It's gonna be effective, right? It's like, you don't know. That's why I tell people, I just continue to build your bag of tools, have them at the ready. And then, you could feel, okay, whatever you want to deploy, whether it's a certain skill, worksheet, or just talking to them about something, right? Like that's what comes with experience. And that's a part of the art form of kind of recognizing that stuff. And that's why, I tell people, just like, we just go into it, have a conversation, learn about them, build your skills, build your experience, grow your experience, and then, it'll all come together.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I like to ask, my guests on the show is, is about like because I know there are people listening who would want to work in the field, in our industry. And I'd like to get my guest perspectives on what they would tell someone who would want to break in and eventually work in doing what we do.
Yeah. Two things come to my mind, and these are two things that Justin Sua with the Rays gave me when I first, literally like a month after I finished playing, and like, dude, what am I doing? This may be something that I want to explore. He's got a really solid podcast of, I don't know, it's like 6-7 minutes of what he would say, but these two things really stood out to me. First is get your reps in, and whether that's going to local travel ball teams or the local tennis courts, youth programs, and just asking the program director or the coach, hey, this is what I have to offer. This is what I would like to do. I'll do it free of charge. Could we set some workshops up, or some individual sessions that I could work with players and coaches, and just getting reps that way? And it's super uncomfortable. It's super difficult. At least it was for me. Maybe other people, their experience is different, but that was a challenge of like just cold calling high school coaches in my area and saying, hey, this is what I have to offer. I'd love to give a talk to your team or go through a couple exercises. So getting your reps. Other ways to get reps is get your camera on your computer or your phone and give a mental minute. Get a topic of something of substance that you can rap on for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and like no retakes. It's just like, okay, here's my camera, push record, and I'm going to rap on the topic, and getting repetitions in that way. So as many repetitions as you can. Probably not going to make money early on, I would say, but it helps build your experience to make money in the future and to become a good practitioner. Yeah. The second thing is, and this comes from Justin as well, is consume to create. And what he means by that, what I mean by that is when you're reading a research article or a book or listening to a podcast, consume it and think of ways that you can create it and put it out on social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or a blog. Like, try to synthesize and simplify complex research into applicable principles that people can digest. And that's something that I do every single day. Is I have a consume to create little checklist that I do, and that's where I put out a daily tweet. And it's not to get clients, it's the sole purpose of it is to keep me accountable that I'm consuming to create each and every day. So whether that's a podcast, a research article, a book, something that I can read and think about, okay, how can I put this simply for a client or for somebody outside of the field that they can digest and apply? So getting it in repetitions and then consuming to create is essential for people who want to be elite practitioners. And I even think that elite practitioners embody those two things. Like, again, I keep going back to Justin, but he puts out a podcast 5-6 times a week that started of him getting in his repetitions. He doesn't take, there's one take, he doesn't stop and re-record, but it's just for him to get his repetitions. And that's why, in my opinion, he's one of the best in the industry. But so those are the two things.
I love it, man. Great advice. That's gold right there. Appreciate that. And it's true. Your first point, I can't stress that enough as well, because it's talking to different early practitioners, people picking my brain, asking me advice, and I tell them sometimes you have to put in that grind, that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
A small percentage of people like get the pro ball job right out of grad school, right? Like the majority of the time you got to put in the work, and it takes, like you said, it's uncomfortable at first. And breaking news, that's pretty much everyone to begin with, okay, myself included. Like, but eventually you start to kind of get comfortable with it. You start to realize, and be more mindful of like your own style, what works for you, how you approach certain things, right? What you feel is effective, all that stuff, right? All that, building that art form, like I talked about. But yeah, it just, sometimes you have to put in that grind, and like, yeah, sometimes you put in the, you go give that free workshop, and now, in its own kind of entity, it's great, right? And you'd be surprised. Sometimes those things can turn into paid individual clients. That's what I tell them. Don't be
because the dads of the kids are CEOs at a business, or they coach a different team. It's like, wait a second, 100%.
Yeah. So that's what I tell people. Don't be afraid to give some free stuff out. Either you might get stuff right away, or maybe down the line say, hey, this happened to me. I actually, the archer, right? It came from a mom of who she works at a high school that I went to go give a talk to for the whole athletics program one time, right? So and this was like 2 years ago, and all of a sudden I get this email from this mom who's a teacher there and say, hey, I have a daughter. she's in archery. She's great, and she's having some mental kind of challenges, mental blocks, all that stuff. And the AD said, hey, you should talk to this person, and I was like, oh, that's awesome, right? So I guess I did something right, or I said something right. Like 2 years later, I get some random email from his mom, and all of a sudden we're doing great work, so that's all I'm saying. Like, yeah, sometimes this stuff doesn't really, you might not see the results right away, but sometimes, you can't think so much about like, I need to get paid this and that, like, especially early on. You got to put in the work. And yeah, sometimes you get some clients, sometimes not. But at the very least, you get the experience, right? You get to sharpen your craft, or sharpen your skills. And that second point I love too is like, yeah, I laugh because, people talk about, oh, I have all these books, right? I've read all these books. What have you done with it? What have you done with that knowledge? And that's fine. If you want to just kind of keep it to yourself, that's perfectly fine, right? But like, if you're in a position of like potentially helping people, why not use it? Why not put it out there, either with your clients or just put it out, especially if you're on social media, like put it out there, right? And share the wealth, share the knowledge, right? And I think it's a beautiful thing. So my brother, Adam, I appreciate your time today, man. A lot of good stuff. Now, if anyone wanted to follow up with you or follow you or get in contact with you, what would be the best way that they can do that?
Yeah. Twitter is usually my go-to. My handle is at AdamLaw217. It's the same on Instagram. I'm not as active on Instagram yet, maybe in the future, but at AdamLaw217. My website is mojolab.com. Email is adam@mojolab.com. So any of those is perfect. And I'm super responsive. I take pride in getting back to people fast, because it's something that I value as well when other people get back fast to me. So happy to help out in any way that I can, and appreciative again of you inviting me here. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you, brother. And I really enjoyed our talk before, and that's why I was like, yeah, I gotta have you on, because I just again, we're just having this conversation, and I wanted to. Hopefully, there's at least one person out there that the information we talked about today can help them. At least one. But if not, hey, at least we had a fun conversation as we typically do. So I appreciate you, brother, and appreciate you coming on and taking the time. And I look forward to seeing what you do and seeing how this next chapter pans out for you, which I know it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to you for giving back to the community and impacting other people's lives. So appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. So, hey, well, I appreciate, our guest, Adam Law. Appreciate you watching. If you like what you see, tell your friends, tell your family. Go subscribe down below. Okay. And again, thank you all for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you on the next one.
Peace.